an adjustment to capitalism that a political scientist has made, and we continue to use his adjustment today, and we'll have a little dialogue in between. And when I've given you the lecture, then I'll let you go. Before I do that, someone tell me what AFDC stands for. Your quiz is in 4 days. 100%. AFDC. Oh, you're reading your notes. No, you can't be reading your notes.
I can use the notes on the quiz.
Go ahead.
It's for families of dependent children.
Dependent children. Someone without their notes. What does TANF stand for?
Temporary assistance for needy families.
Yes. Wow. Cool. And according to welfare lecture, this is what? Cash. And all transfer payments come in the form of?
Cash.
Cash. Okay. So maybe you'll do well on this. Okay. Hopefully. Okay. To start on capitalism, we go back to John Locke, 1698. He's the one who invents libertarianism. He's got 3 important ideas that are going to produce the economic idea of capitalism. I'm taking the politics out of it. We had a little politics on this is Wednesday, so on Monday. Okay, we talked about how libertarianism gives us self-ownership so we can pursue our own interests, life, liberty, and the pursuit of. Locke says without property you can't be happy. Now, let me break this down for you. You're going to see this on your quiz. I'll put up the note, but I want to do the lecture first. Locke says, in the old day, the king owned everything and everybody. Now that we're free, we have access to what he calls nature. He says nature was given to us, again, by the authority, by the higher authority, by God. Now, this is how he says you can make wealth and therefore be happy. He says if you take nature and appropriate it to yourself, if you add your labor to it, then it becomes yours. What does that mean? Well, let's say I come across a flock of wild geese, and somehow I domesticate them. Locke says that becomes mine. That's private property. I have used my labor, and I have harnessed, or in a sense appropriated nature, and so that becomes mine. I come across a herd of wild cows, say, and I can domesticate them, and then they start to mate and they have more and more. That herd of cows is mine then. I come across a field of corn, and I somehow tame it so that I can reproduce more and more. That becomes my corn. So anything in nature that you put your labor to, you can take ownership of, and that then becomes yours. Now, how does that translate into wealth? Okay, I have corn and you have a cow. You want my corn? Let's trade. So we have commerce going on there, and that's how wealth is produced in the early days, when nature is what we're trading for. But you don't own nature until you appropriate nature so that you take ownership of it. Everybody follow that? Water, oil, anything that nature provides for us, either on the land or in the land, when you add your labor to it, it becomes your property, and you can dispose of it any way you want to. And that's how we initially did bartering, and that's how we had an exchange of goods, and we call that commerce in the early days. We still do that now. When I had my computer business, I had a CPA, certified public accountant, someone who does taxes. I would do his computer work and he would do my taxes, and we never exchanged cash. But I got what I wanted, he got what he wanted. People still do it today. It's technically not legal. In your taxes, you're supposed to declare all income, whether it's earned through a legal business or whether it's under the table. So that kind of commerce still goes on. Say again?
Up north they call it dickering.
Dickering, yeah. So this is at the heart then of libertarian happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay? Now, a few things to qualify. You're endowed by your Creator. No suicide. You have no right to take your life because your life is not yours. It was given to you by a higher power. Once you have ownership of that life, then you can dispose of it the way you want. So we have self-interest, and then again, property becomes the way that you make wealth. Now, we had a caveat for property. You can use as much property as you want to, but you must leave more than enough for everyone else. The earth was given to all humanity. All humanity, therefore, must have access to property. If you don't have access to property, according to Locke, you can't make wealth, whether it's through bartering or whether it's through exchange of services or goods. So the caveat that's most important to us is that you must leave more than enough for everybody else. Well, the rock is gigantic. And so there is more than enough. But some people still haven't gotten the message, and so they try and harness a certain amount of resources. The Hunt brothers in Texas almost harness 80% of the silver on the planet. That's called a monopoly. And if you do that, other people don't have access to it. And Locke said that violates the basic arrangement we have with the higher power, the creator. You're endowed by your creator with certain inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of property, or the protection of property. So if we understand those are the fundamentals, that's what libertarianism is really all about, the way Locke invented it. Any questions about him? Because you're going to see him on your quiz. Let me bring the notes up. The notes are not difficult, people. I've tried to break them down so that each one of them gets a little bit. Here's Locke. Concerning civil government, private property, God gave nature property to humans to use for their benefit. Individual involves human labor. When mixed with nature, it becomes private property. Thus, the individual is free to use private property as they see fit, as long as they leave more than enough for everyone else. Gives rights to individual rights. The right to life, liberty, and preservation of property. Requires that the freedom of the individual supersedes the freedom of the group, which results in a serious objection. A community is more than a collection of individuals. It's an organic whole, and the good of each is not necessarily the good of all. So this is a community. According to Locke, we're all individuals, and we can swing our elbows as much as we want, as long as you don't connect with someone else's nose. So someone says, well, Professor, my aunt got sick this weekend and I didn't have time to do the quiz. Can you open the quiz? Well, see, we're a community. That's an extenuating circumstance you have no control over. But I don't do that to everybody. Well, I just forgot. I was too lazy. I went out partying, got too drunk, and I forgot to take the quiz. Those aren't equivalencies. So what Locke is saying here, what the objection is we're not just individuals, we are a community. And how we react affects us. I have 89.7. Is there any way I can get an A? Well, technically, no. But I'm allowed to go back and I look at the grades, and really good quiz scores, and they get better and better and better, and you're just so close. So an A is possible. I can give you an A. Even though you didn't, quote, earn it as an individual, but as a group, maybe there's some value to that. So this answers one of the objections to a pure idea of what libertarianism is. We're all individuals. We can do whatever we want as long as we don't violate anyone else's rights. Well, yes and no. Everybody understand how that becomes a yes or no? Okay. Human rights implies more than leaving people alone to compete with one another. It necessitates an equal opportunity to participate and contribute to society. We'll get to this with the last third of the lecture with a fellow named John Rawls, because we're not in this individually, we are in this together. So that's in 1698. In 1776, another British philosopher named Adam Smith writes a book called Wealth of Nations with a French subtitle, Laissez-faire Capitalism, Free Market Capitalism. Now, he happens to publish it in September. The Declaration of Independence is published and ratified in July. Capitalism, therefore, is not in our documents. It was adopted by us as an economic way of distributing wealth. And as it turns out, it's the most powerful economic engine anyone's developed so far. But it has an Achilles heel. What's an Achilles heel? Anybody know? A weak point? A weak point. So actually it turns out what makes it work is also what makes it fail. And that's what gives rise to things like the Great Depression. So let me explain Adam Smith. He takes John Locke's idea. He says if you take property and you add your labor to it, you can come up with a product. And this is the cost of the product. Now, if you can sell a product for this much, the difference between that he calls a surplus value. You have to, and I'll show you the notes. You have to know the language now for the quiz. Or we call this what? Profit. You worked hard for it. You should be entitled to keep it. This then is what we call the entitlement conception of economic justice. Here's the word picture. Get all you can all you get. Don't sit on the can. It's your can. You worked hard for it. You ought to be entitled to keep it. Except we understand that because we're not atomistic, because we're in a community, there's certain things that are to the benefit of all society if we all agree to it. So we agree to a standing military, police force, fire department, health, and education. Those are the basic things we say we need as a community of individuals, okay? And in order to provide those services, we have to pay for them. But we don't pay for them individually. We pay for them corporately. This results in taxation. This is, we talked about for welfare. So the government reaches into our pocket to pay collectively for the services of standing military, police force, fire department, health, and education. 150 years ago, we invented public education. Up until then, you couldn't get educated if you didn't have money to pay for it. When you're working on the farm, most people don't have money to pay for it. This costs, lights cost, everything costs, salary costs. Where's it going to come from? We asked this on Monday. How many of you get FAFSA loans? It's someone else's money to help you get an education so you can prosper. Okay? So, under Adam Smith's capitalism, if you take property and add your labor to it, you get a product that you can sell for more than it costs you. This is profit, surplus value. It belongs to you. You worked for it. You ought to be allowed to keep it, minus what we agreed to for the general welfare. Everything else that's left over is yours. Nobody should tell you how to spend that money. That's as simple as capitalism is. I'll give you an example. Back in the day, I told the family we were going to live on the skinny for about 6 months. Skinny means you go to McDonald's once a month. And we put the money aside because I needed money so I could buy computer parts because I was going to go into business. So I buy computer parts. Now, labor isn't always physical. I had to put them together physically, but I had to learn to run computers. So there's intellectual labor, there's physical labor. I added that to my labor, and I ended up with a product that you call computers. And this is how much it cost. I turned around and I sold it for $500 profit, so for $1,000. According to Adam Smith, this is mine. Now I've invested $500 and I get $500, so I have $1,000. I reinvested more property and now I have enough to build 2 computers. And I end up with $1,000 profit. Plus $1,000 I started with. I take that in and I buy twice as much again, and I end up with 4, with 8, with 16, and within 3.5 years I'm making $100,000 a year. Formula works if you understand how to work the formula. It works for anybody and everybody, but you must have access to property. If you don't have access to property, what do you have left? Don't quit your day job. You can't make wealth off of labor. Because there's so many of us, we become a commodity and we go to the lowest bidder. If someone can pay you less for the same job, who are they going to hire? For the same job, the same result. Now, Adam Smith said that in a competitive world, we all need to survive, we all need to prosper. He thought that the competition that was entailed by taking property and taking labor and making a product and put it on a line would produce a better product for less cost. In other words, let's say we all make mouse traps, and yours is better. And you can sell yours for 10 cents less. How many people would pay more for a product that's not as good? Smith said people would be inclined to pay less money for a better product. Here's where competition comes into play. So you see competitive market out there all the time. There's people doing the same thing for one another, and they're offering prices and they're offering quality, service, whatever. And you shop for the best deal, right? I mean, I'm not crazy, right? We shop for the best deal. Okay. He said, therefore, that if we allow for the competitive market to work in the area of property and labor, we get better products at less cost, and the economy would flourish. Everybody follow that concept? Okay. I think he's right, because we all shop, and we don't